Hi, a very good afternoon. Thank you so much for having taken the time to have joined me in today's webinar. Before we get started, I would request you to get yourself comfortable, grab a notepad and get yourself a cup of coffee because we are going to have an interesting session today. And the topic for today's session is going to be around Office 365, security and compliance. So you early birds, before we get started, I'm going to ask you for the usual favor that I always ask for. I want your signal for go. All right. It's the audio video check that I'm doing right now. If you can hear me loud and clear, check, 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 audio check, Office 365 webinar. And if you can see my screen as well clearly, please use the chat window to say great to me. If you can hear me loud and clear, check, check, Office 365 webinar check. And if you can see my screen clearly, make use of the chat window to let me know the same. Say great on chat, and I'm going to get started with today's presentation. Wonderful. Thank you so much for the confirmation, guys. We are all set and good to go. So welcome to another session of Office 365 Security and Compliance. My name is Jay, your presenter for the day. I am with the security and compliance team here at Manage Engine. So myself, I'm basically a consultant right here for cloud security. This is one specific topic that's dear and near to my heart. Why would I say that? If you were to be following the Microsoft Ignite that's happening in Orlando, it's been happening for the last 2 days. Today is going to be the third day in the 3 day massive event Microsoft has put together. There have been some phenomenal announcements regarding Office 365 security updates and what is in store for 2019. Way forward, it's absolutely clear to all of us that security has taken center stage. The long due attention that was not given is now in place. And in fact, there are announcements that could boggle your mind. Things like passwordless authentication, things like a mobile application that could get you authenticated into your Office 365 or your Microsoft 365 as they bundled it recently. So today's seminar or presentation is on a topic that for long has not been clear to most of us. We try to understand and consume as much as data as possible, do trial and errors, figure out what works best for you, and then have come up with this security in Office 365 as the topic for today's session. So one thing that we'll need to understand is, unlike the past where we had on-premise applications, we knew what exactly to work with. Now, when it's the cloud, it's changing day by day at an exponential pace. Nobody can really tell you what new attack is going to be coming up tomorrow. So the best approach is to be proactive. The best approach is to have all your guards up in place, have a multi-layered security approach that guarantees the highest levels of protection possible. Yes, it's going to be possible, no doubt. We will be working at an application level. We would want the security to take center stage and surround all our identity management around security. All right. So through today's session, what I'll be doing is I'll be demystifying all those Office 365 queries that all of us have in mind. And like I started telling you what happened in the Ignite conference where Satya announced how Office 365 is going to evolve. If you were to have followed, Office 365 has got some cool updates. The security and compliance centers have a new update. In fact, there's something called as the Secure Score, which is going to help you do a self-eval. You would be able to check where exactly you stand, what implementations do you need to take into consideration, what features and functionalities should you avail, where are you lacking. Things like that are going to be available in the Secure Score Analyzer. It will give you real-time insights on what needs to be done and how to improve. I will be giving you first hand info on what was spoken, and I will be also sharing with you four critical parameters for Office 365 security, as I would like to call it, the four critical pillars of Office 365 compliance and security. Be it GDPR, personal data protection has taken a massive turnaround, and everybody is talking about personal data protection. And this has been there for quite some time, is it not? Even before GDPR or any such compliance came into the picture, we've always been concerned about data security. And that starts with access control. So many times attacks start from this point where someone tries to access an administrator account, try and crack the administrator account's password or some service account's passwords because of the perimeter vulnerability that we have in our systems, because we do not have a clear cut, strong, defined authentication policy in place. So how do we strengthen our access control? We'll be talking about that. And data transfer, yes, obviously. Data transfer is a big vulnerability because it involves users. Let me get to the point where users turn out to be the big problem, not just data transfer. The security of an organization is only as strong as the weakest link. You know what's the weakest link. We've all seen it, have we not? We still have users in our organizations who write down their passwords. They do it. They write it down on a sticky note. They put it right on top of their desktops. Wow. Irrespective of how hard you try to, bring in security measures, our users are always going to do things like this. So we will need foolproof systems that let us monitor, track, securely administer, and also at the same time work with our users in tandem and have email security done for their email accounts. So we'll be talking about security from 4 points. One direction is going to be access control. The next is data transfer. We'll also be talking about email security and how exactly are we planning to administer the whole of this in a very secure fashion. That is pretty much going to be the agenda for the day. So what I've done is I've broken down the whole idea of security under four critical pointers that I think is more than enough to get you started. I wouldn't say this is all you would need to become 100% compliant. I would say this is a great place to start with. So we can start by understanding that audit and compliance at any given point in time go hand in hand. If you have the right data, many times you turn out to be compliant by default. All you got to do is know who to track, which account to grab hold of. If there are administrator accounts, how do I keep track of who's doing what? How do I keep track of which administrator account is being accessed? When exactly is a logon happening? Do I need to monitor admin's account? Yes. All of a sudden, if in the middle of the night there's an anomalous logon to an admin account from an IP that you have no idea about, how exactly are you going to track this? What if there's a provision? What if there's an alert? What if there's a buzz on your phone that tells you something's going wrong? That an admin account has been logged on. The IP address is anomalous. That's what we'll be talking about today. An ability to alert and audit admin logon data. We'll also go further, not just restrict ourselves with admin data, but also work with user data, because user accounts tend to be hacker friendly, I would call. It is easy for attackers to bypass securities because users tend to have weak passwords. So we would have provisions to check for abnormal spikes in logon activities of that of users. We'll be talking about that. We'll go further and also discuss about custom audit profiles. There might be innumerable number of scenarios that you would be coming across day in day out. I can't tell you that, see, these are going to be the 10 top scenarios that you would face, and here you have audit profiles. No, that's not the best approach. I'm going to give you a provision where you can work on your own scenario. I will just give you the building blocks. I want you to put together the building blocks and build custom audit profiles to be able to isolate those anomalous activities, monitor those anomalous activities, and get alerts just in case if something's going wrong. Be proactive. That's what I want you to do. And going further, having spoken about auditing and monitoring, we cannot have a security system rounded and completed without multi-factor authentication in place. In fact, that was the theme of day before yesterday's presentation. So multi-factor authentication is now going to be stronger than ever in Office 365. Every user is going to get access to a simple mobile application. They can authenticate themselves through Touch ID. We all know how that works. Your Apple or your Android smartphones now have a fingerprint sensor. You can tie that along with your Office 365 application access. You can do that. We'll be talking about multi-factor authentication. And finally, we'll also be talking about data security, where we get to see how exactly are we monitoring who's accessing what file. It could be on your OneDrive, it could be on any of your other applications on Office 365. How do we monitor this and how do we get alerts? Can I set profiles for this as well? That is one question that I will be answering through today's session. So we'll be taking a deep dive into different aspects of Office 365 security and eventually end up complying to most of the regulations that are out there. If there is a data breach, how do I have a system in place that's going to help me tackle such a data breach? If there are certain privilege escalations, do I have a check gate that lets me keep track of who's got what privileges and demote them or depromote them or reduce their privileges when need arises? So I'm talking about privacy by design. I'm talking about data that is absolutely secure, where information resides in under your control and you know who has what access for what data. So rights management, privacy control for your sites, libraries, and folders, all that we will be talking about, ending up making you compliant to all the regulations that are out there. All right. So we'll start off by understanding Office 365 compliance and security from an auditing standpoint. The first thing that I'll want all of us to understand is logon activity. So when attackers try to bypass security, they do all sorts of things. We've had a recent incident. This was about 3 to 4 months back, if I'm not wrong. We had one of our customers that faced this situation. The perpetrators tried to acquire a set of corporate usernames, which is our customers' usernames and their passwords. And guess how they did it? They got absolutely clever. What they did was they tied to multiple cloud services, not just Office 365, but then multiple cloud services. Then, using public cloud tenants, they were able to launch a brute force attack on all these corporate user accounts. So to accomplish this, they started off by trying different permutations of employee names. Say, for example, if Stephen was the name of the employee and they knew that he was the chief of the staff, they saw all his login attempts on this specific account. And if you see, they tried different combinations of usernames. They went on to do this about some 15 to 20 attempts and in an about 4 second time interval from 14 different IP addresses. And guess what? They were able to crack the password. So all of this fundamentally starts because we do not have a system that negates this. We do not have a system that lets me audit and give me a red alert when there's such malicious activity. So I am going to walk you through a system that is going to give you instant notification when there are multiple logon failures. All right. Quickly walking you through the solution in today's presentation. Just give me one quick second. We are talking about Office 365 Manager Plus. All right, so I'm going to quickly drop the link on the chat for you to simultaneously access the product as I demonstrate today. Demo.o365managerplus.com is the URL. Please log in as the administrator if you want to check all the functionalities as I demonstrate. All right, you can also do a technician login at a later point in time. So here you go. you've got the entire list of functionalities that are available. Take a look, take a minute or two, see which functionalities would help you the best, and we'll go further. So today's topic is essentially on security and compliance aspect of it, auditing and alerting aspect of it, and yes, we will also talk about delegation reports. All right, so we'll primarily focus on security and compliance. So going further, logging in as the administrator. So here, our intention is to be able to track the activity of logon. Okay, we would want reports that give us real-time insights on who's logged on, who's logging off, when have they logged on, how many times have they tried, have they failed in their attempt. That is exactly what we want to do. So I'm getting to the audit reports, and all I need to do is look for logon, and I've got four functionalities right here to track successful logons, failed logons due to inactive credentials, and logged on failed users. So the failed logons due to inactive credentials audit report can be configured so that it gives me details as to what was the account that was undergoing this failure, how many attempts of failure were there, which endpoints did these users try to initiate the logon and they failed. And in fact, if you're talking about the IP address tracking, you can very much do that as well. Likewise, you would have a failed logons report here, and it will give you like the full-fledged picture on what, where, when, and how. So I'd like you to also parallelly check the demonstration and see if it's going to be of any help to you. So here you go. So you would get a clear-cut picture on this specific dashboard where you're able to see how the users logged on failed. And in fact, you can create your own view to check a specific account if you want. If there are administrative accounts, I would prefer all these administrative accounts are set on your radar, and just in case if there are repeated multiple logon failures, you can configure an alert profile right here, schedule a report, and have it delivered to your inbox, or a text notification or an email alert. You could choose from the options that are available. You could do that. You could very much do that. So what are we trying to do right here is to track the logon success and logon failure. And again, based on the invalid credentials and the number of logon failures, here you go. How many attempts of failure were there due to a bad username or a bad password? You get the entire list of logon failure, and you have multiple filters with which you can work so that you can pinpoint to what went wrong. So getting back to our presentation, how is this going to be useful? If we are talking about a compliance like HIPAA, healthcare data and its safety. So HIPAA requires you to have a definitive process in place for determining whenever users are logging onto a computer whether health information is essentially being stored. And if there's a log off from the same computer, that also needs to be audited. So for every log on and log off, since you have an audit profile that is going to give you details of who's logged on, where, and when exactly all this happened, in addition to it being tracked, recorded, and archived, you become HIPAA compliant for that specific category instantaneously. In addition, if you have inactive accounts in your organization, we all know that inactive accounts turn out to be a very big security vulnerability for the organization. They turn out to be the best bet for a hacker or an attacker, and especially if these inactive accounts have privileged accesses, the outsiders find it absolutely easy to skim through into these inactive accounts, initiate an attack, and there you go. Even before you know, there's so much data that's lost, especially customer data or patient data that's lost, and you have a lawsuit filed on your organization. We do not want that. So you can be sure that you will get notified when some malicious logon attempt gets triggered. We are working on a module that is going to respond proactively to such thresholds. We are working on executing certain, instruments of management of Office 365 management in place which would stop such an attack. So we're working on that module as well. So how do you react to such a case? At this point in time, we give you an alert and we let you get to the system and have that fixed. Working going forward, we've got in roadmap to also manage that right away. So that is the first point that you would need to concentrate: the ability to audit user data and their accesses and track their logon activities. In addition to this, tracking their logon log off is one thing. Checking who's got what permission is definitely as important as the previous case. So to accomplish this, we will need to be able to monitor what are the activities that an Azure administrator is performing. What are the activities that an Exchange administrator is performing? The moment someone has the admin privileges in Office 365, it would take not more than a minute to grant themselves permission into every other application, and there you go. Even before you know, they've got privileges across the Office 365 spectrum. So we would want the provision to be able to monitor, audit, and alert in case there's a change in the admin role, in case there's more privilege added to the admin role, or so to say, if you're working based on group membership changes, if you're working based on granting privileges to users based on group memberships, you will be able to detect any such group membership changes, users being added to groups, users being removed from groups, things like that, and get notified for that as well. So here, what we want to do is monitor everything that goes around an administrator's account. So that is what we intend to do right here. All right, not just the admin's account, but also anything that's associated with the groups in admin accounts or related to the admin accounts. All right. So we would want an auditing profile or a report. Let me quickly walk you through that. A report, in this case, an Azure admin activity report or an Azure user report, where I get to track the Exchange admin activity. So I have Exchange users, I have users who are inactive on my Exchange, so on and so forth. My intention right now is to be able to have a user report to track, all right, Exchange admin activity. There you go. I've got a report right there. This is both a security and a compliance report. It's going to help me monitor all activities that an Exchange administrator does. So if an Exchange administrator unnecessarily adds certain email addresses to send on behalf as or send as through for few identities, and you immediately get a red alert, there you go, you know what to do. You could probably understand that someone is trying to mess around, has got the privilege, and he or she is trying to get access to data that's beyond their purview, data for which they're not supposed to have access. Likewise, if you want to audit and get an alert for Azure admin activity, you might very well do that as well. In terms of Office 365 admin roles, you would want to monitor the role changes, right? That's where it all begin. So I can get to the reports, all right, and quickly look up for a report regarding the admin roles. So I can have a complete overview on what are the admin roles, and I can also see who's been recently added as a member to the admin role, who's been recently removed from the admin role. This is where we have to understand that attackers get intelligent. It's not that they just try to add themselves into admin roles, but the damage that could be caused by removing the right administrators or the right executives from the security groups could be as big as the damage that they could cause themselves adding themselves into a security group. So removal is equally important, and you'd want that as well to be tracked. So you can track admin role changes, you can track uh, users being added to an admin group or being removed from it. All right. So from a group point of view, again, here you go. All you need to do is type in group, and you have reports that are going to tell you what exactly is happening. So if you want to know recently modified groups, you'd be able to track that as well. So let me quickly look up for recently modified groups. So here you go, recently removed members from groups. Likewise, I have recently added members to group as well. All right, I'm going to quickly show you the other reports that are available. Recently added members to the group. So I will get hold of all those users being added to specific groups in these specific hours. Here you go. If I want to get granular, modify the properties, specify one group and just get a view, a custom view for that group, I could very much do that. And in fact, that's what I suggest. That would be the best practice to do. So say what property or what group was modified, or have any of these other parameters that you want to really track and generate a filter for and get going with the report. So he recently added members to group. And if you want to do this, I'd suggest do this for non-business hours as well. That's when all these attackers try and creep in. When there are non-businesses, probably over the weekends, that's when most of the security attacks happen, probably on a Friday when the everybody is leaves the organization, nobody is available to check. But still, since you're that smart administrator, you're always going to be ahead of the attacker. You would get a notification instantly. You can log in from your mobile application, initiate whatever recovery measure that you want to do. As simple as that. So what we're discussing right here was, or could have been, a useful solution for an organization in the United States. So SunTrust, about a year back, had this big problem. They're like the 12th largest bank with about $200 billion in assets. They've got about 1,000 plus branches across the country, and about 1.5 million customers' data was stolen. 1.5 million of its customers. So that's a huge number of customers' data being stolen. And what makes this particular data breach different from the rest of it? This data breach was essentially initiated by an insider. All that the insider did was get hold of a few privileges, and all that the insider stole was customer data pertaining to their email addresses. And since he had the access for their email addresses, he was able to send out mails that looked legitimate, and it looked as if they were from the bank. So he ended up downloading keystroke, sending keystroke logging malware to all their victims, and did a few spoof calls and ended up making a lot of money. Though it was found out, it was back traced, the person responsible for this was imprisoned and things. It took a lot of time and the organization took a big hit. We would not want anything of that sort. What we'd want is a proactive system in place. This brings us to the point where we need to understand the best practice for privileged administration. So that's where I would want to bring in the delegation module. When we're talking about delegation, there is one big disadvantage when it comes to the default or the native Office 365 admin center way of delegating rights to users. It doesn't get granular. Trust me, it doesn't get granular, and keeping track of who's got what access over which service or application or role becomes even more difficult. So now I'm going to introduce you to a granular delegation. That's number one, role based. Number two, non intrusive. What do I mean when I say non intrusive? What if I tell you I would need just one admin account with the right credentials for my Office 365 manager to work, and rest of all the other technicians that you want to be configured with the required credentials can impersonate that one admin that you're configuring in the product, and even before you know, they don't need any actual roles or responsibilities or credentials in Office 365, but still get to perform those tasks. Does it not sound cool? I know, I completely understand. You must be having a question in mind. What about the auditing? If all the technicians in my organizations are going to impersonate that one admin account, who's going to be held responsible, or what am I going to tell my auditors when they come asking me for who did what task or who did what action? That's where we've got the audit reports that are going to give you real time insights and archived log data that tells you which technician performed what activity, when they signed into the system, which role did they take into the picture, what was their target object, what tenant did they work on, a lot of other parameters, every single thing, every single data from where they logged into, what modifications that they made is going to be logged. And when it comes to delegation, we're talking about a role based delegation right here. I can create custom roles for different stakeholders. So I can have a custom role for a help desk technician. And all that the technician performs is create a few Office 365 accounts and assign licenses. If that's the case, why would I want the technician to have an admin level privilege? I would just give him that granularity, right? I would just give them the option to perform any of the tasks that's listed right here. And delegation is just check boxes away. I can select the privileges that need to be given. If it's group management, what can they do? What all can they generate? If it's management pertaining to an application, what all reports can they do? I can do that. If it's auditing that they want to do, especially in organizations that have in-house auditors, they come after us all the time asking for reports. I can give them dashboards and assign a few reports or audit reports that they'd want to know and give them an access to a free dashboard. So what's the problem? I can empower as many number of stakeholders involved in Office 365 with custom dashboards and logons, and this is absolutely free. When it comes to managing users, that's when I need a few technicians, and few technicians who have the right privileges to perform what you want them to do. So you create roles, you get granular, tell who gets what, and take a least privilege approach. Give them just enough access. Least privilege approach and just enough access are something that you should have it in mind every time when you're doing a delegation. And when it comes to delegation of roles, like I told you, you get to create roles, then you get to assign them to technicians. And when you're assigning, let's say there's an operator who gets the role, you would want to ensure that this option is enabled, impersonate as administrator. So this way, the user or the operator's actual permission in Office 365 does not need to change or be altered, but all that they additionally get is an ability to use the admin that's configured in the product as a persona or as a gateway to access O365 and perform management. So it's absolutely secure. Minimum touch points directly to Office 365, improved security, obviously, and ability to keep track of who's done what. In case if I want to downsize my employees or downgrade one person's access, I could very much do that. I could depreciate their access right here. All right. So we've been talking about monitoring activities pertaining to admins and how exactly are we going to be able to monitor group membership changes. And we spoke about the best practice delegating based on roles and a non-invasive delegation approach. So the next thing that we'll want to concentrate is the ability to create custom views and custom audit profiles to monitor those events that are pertaining to your organization. So if you can create an alert for something as critical as activities for a specific users, let's say on your radar you pick up an anomalous behavior for a few email addresses. All right, you would just want to monitor those email addresses for some time. Those accounts are accounts of critical executives in your organizations, and all of a sudden there's this anomalous log on happening at random non-business hours from non-familiar IPs or IPs out of your usual range. So you can very much create a custom audit profile for these individual users, track their activities, And just in case if you want to set an alert and block any of that activity, you could very well do that. About a year back, there was one big phishing attack. Ohio living provider, a health service, provider had, and they lost about 42,000 records of patient data. So healthcare seems to be most of the attackers' sweet spot. That's where they try and target, because access to such information is going to be a lot of money. So here, I'm going to give you an option to be able to audit, alert, and create your custom alert profiles and send out red alerts when there's a malicious activity happening beyond the usual. So we've got an audit report right here that monitors email activity of mailbox owners. So I've created my custom view right here, and I've got an additional non-owner activity also in place. So I can go on, enforce more such filters, have things like IP in place, check for IP, and if it doesn't fit within the range, I'm going to get an alert. Check for the usual logon details, or check for attributes other than the IP, things that I could target and see the list of folders that are being accessed if it's critical data. So I'm going to be able to target to a specific folder. Go on, I've got so many more filters. I can create a customized audit profile for my specific requirement, in this case tracking activities of all those critical mailboxes in your organization, and then initiating an alert for the very same thing. All right. So this way I would very much get to stay on top of my system. So here we are trying to be compliant to many standards because I have a very firm system in place that monitors activity on my Exchange mailbox. So I'm trying to be compliant with custom audit profiles where I can give my auditor clear insights on any account in my organization with the complete audit trail. All right. How does this go beyond the native way of doing it? I've got profile based auditing right here. I've got group based auditing right here. I can specify users in a group and monitor them. And in fact, like I pointed out, I have advanced filters in the product that are going to let me filter out custom IP ranges. If there's something happening beyond the custom IP range, I can map that. And as a matter of fact, when it comes to exporting, obviously we support multiple formats, ones that with which you could work with. All right, so we've been talking about auditing, we've been talking about monitoring and isolating activities of users. We would also want the provision to be compliant, right? What if I tell you I've got a document, a wonderful resource out here for you? I'm going to quickly pop that up on the screen right now. And there you go. So we've got a list of guides that are going to help you become instantly compliant with all these regulations. If you're working with PCI, HIPAA, SOX, GLBA, FISMA, GDPR, we are adding more such documentations on the go. Let's say PCI. So you would want credit card information to be saved right, handled right. We've got a very clear, detailed documentation that would give you all that insight. So now what I'm going to do is on the chat, I'm going to transfer the link for these documents. Please download. They are absolutely free. Feel free to go through them in case you have any queries. I'll give you my email address. You can write to me and you could expect a response immediately. No problem at all. So we are talking about increasing security through multi-factor authentication. So multi-factor authentication, like I pointed out earlier, is the way forward. In fact, they're calling it the smart authentication because it's going to have multiple parameters working in the background, not just a few security questions or an OTP, but things like custom IP range. The machine learning algorithm is going to understand who is the user logging in, from which endpoint is the user logging in, make the authentication or the number of factors less when they are logging in or authenticating themselves from the IP that they usually log on or the device that they usually log on, and it goes on. So I definitely want you to check that one specific access. And another interesting resource for today's session. Here you go. So this specific resource, okay, just give me 1 second. I'm going to get that resource out. It's the secure score for Office 365. So right after this session, I'm going to challenge you. Get your Office 365 environment. This is free. Check your secure score and tell me how much you scored. And I'm going to give you ways to improve the scores. So I've already analyzed what works best for organizations. We've got a list of things that you can implement in under probably 30 minutes time and increase your security score just like that. Okay, so the security score is going to analyze your existing system, tell you what all you've missed, and one parameter that could give you an instant kick up for your security score is multi-factor authentication. Let me check if I've got multi-factor authentication implemented. There you go. So I've got 0 out of 50 on multi-factor authentication. So if I were to have multi-factor authentication, I am going to help myself prevent password cracking, account breaches, elevation of privileges, all that. This is for privileged roles, especially if I can get it for my users as well. I'm going to get extra 30 points. So increase or work towards increasing your security score. And as a matter of fact, I would suggest you start, building your security score over 30 days, over 60 days, and 90 days time interval, because if you do it at a progressive level, if you work on such time intervals, you would know how exactly have you changed, how exactly has your organization been benefited. So at any given point in time, you can generate such data, compare your previous scores. You can start off by checking your security score. Things that you need to have in mind would include turning your audit logging on, connecting to cloud app security, enabling Azure AD identity protection, things like that. You could conduct or do a few risk assessments, conduct an attack simulation, and things like that. If you're wondering how to do all this, if this is a lot to process, don't worry. Just write to me. I've put together detailed documentations on how to get things done and on what time intervals do we do this. 30 days, 90 days, 120 days, 60 days, all of that is available. And we'll work together in improving your Office 365 security. In fact, you could do it pretty much from your existing Office 365 dashboard. For going to that next level and becoming compliant instantaneously, that's where Office 365 Manager comes into the picture. So if you'd want to go take that one next step and be proactive, you could very much try out Office 365 Manager Plus. All right. So multi-factor authentication is what we were intending to discuss, and security score for multi-factor authentication, like you saw, would get you additional 60 or 80 points, sorry, 80 points, and elevate your security. So here, what if I tell you in one single click, you can do a bulk multi-factor authentication implementation for all your users. So I'm going to say multi-factor settings. And if you were to ask me, how is this different than the Azure AD P1 and P2 that's already available? This has the provision to do a multi-tenant implementation. The product basically that we're discussing today has the provision to manage multiple tenants and multiple domains under one single console. And in fact, you could do or assign technicians through the delegation module and get them to manage multiple tenants from one single platform with the right credentials with the impersonation in place. How cool is that? You tell me, how cool is that? And when it comes to multi-factor authentication, all these technologies like OTP or alternate mobile numbers receiving notification, office numbers receiving calls, every aspect of that is available. And let me quickly show you Microsoft mobile authenticator. Let me just look up authenticator app. So this is the new application that Microsoft has come up with for Office 365. All right, so this specific application, look up for, let's quickly look up for Ignite 28 mobile authentication. This one thing I want you to go back and try tomorrow. try right now. If you could do that, it would be amazing. Just quickly look up for this, and you'd get the know-how on how to implement this. So remember, get back, try implementing mobile authentication. It is pretty fast, pretty amazing, gets your job done, increases your security score. We've tried it, it works like magic. And in fact, all of your users would be very happy doing this because it saves a lot of time and trouble for them when they're trying to authenticate themselves into it. All right, no passwords. That's the best part. It's just pure authentication based on identities. And the last part of today's session is going to be on data security, on file accesses. So when we're trying to understand data security, it starts with OneDrive, right? Auditing file accesses and sharing in OneDrive is an important aspect of data transfer and protection. So when users try to transfer data from probably one system to another, they need to be very much aware of the consequences of their action, which most of the time they are not. There could be potential data spills of sensitive or classified information in those systems that they never even imagined. And accordingly, users need to be held accountable. So that's too much to do. What if I had a system that would do all of that for me? That's exactly what we would be doing right now. Get to the point where we have a system that would help me audit all this. So we're talking about a provision to audit OneDrive activity. So if there is a data loss or a data leak, you might very well be able to trace it back to the source, see who deleted a file, who copied a file. Data loss could also be copying and leaking the data. You could be on top of your system, get notified when something of that sort happens in your system. All right, there you go. You get real-time reports and actionable audit reports right there. So that's one thing, and obviously, as a matter of fact, you would also want to keep track of other applications where there's collaboration, where there's potential data transfer happening. It could even be on your email if you would be concerned. So, if you want to keep track of your exchange mailboxes, owner and non owner activities, you could do that. If you want to create custom use for them, please do that, because monitoring breaches of email usage would include keeping track of attempts to send prohibited file types. It could be few executable file types that users should not attach. You can monitor that and stop that. Such sensitive classified information without appropriate markings can be stopped, and to enforce this, you've got the tool in place, right? So that is pretty much a roundup on multiple things from a security standpoint. With a few more pointers, I'm going to leave you to ponder upon how exactly this solution can work, and I've already given you access to the demo instance as well. So towards the end of the session, I'm going to give you more resources. Stick along. Managing multiple tenants is something we discussed. Office 365 reporting. Trust me, this is a beauty. We've got about 300 plus pre-built Office 365 reports. So one console or one dashboard, as I'd like to call, that would give you access to 200 to 250 reports in different categories. There you go. So you've got all these reports. You have a report in mind, a scenario in mind. You could tell me. Log on, great. We already checked log on. There you go. Log on access to all these different attempts. If you want to track mailbox, let me quickly show you. So I can say mailbox and all those reports pertaining to mailbox. I've got 67 different reports pertaining to mailbox security, mailbox activity, compliance, mailbox usage, licenses, and things like that. So beyond just being able to monitor, alert, audit, and delegate, there are also provisions to manage Office 365 users from the very same application. So you can create Office 365 users from this tool. You can designate or delegate the right licenses to the users, revoke licenses when time arises. You can have policies configured for that as well, and work towards creating a system where you get a full secure score from Office 365. All right. Like I already pointed out, there are more reports. I can go on and on, but then I would want to conclude my session with a few compliance reports. So when I get to the compliance reports section, I've got an exhaustive list of all the compliances that are available. And if you see, these are the compliance reports that are available. I can do SOX, I can do HIPAA, I can do PCI and DSS, and all of this is going to be applicable for multiple tenants, like I already mentioned. So you get to the tenant settings, you add as many number of tenants as you want, keep adding that, test the connection, get going. So I've got 19 domains under one tenant managed. I can go on and on with as many number of tenants, and all these applications are going to be available across tenants. Similarly, I can work with user identities, their password related attributes as well. So from a security best practice point of view, you would want to keep track of whose passwords are about to expire, whose accounts are inactive, whose accounts are locked out, are there users with inactive licenses. That's how you do it. Start with simple baby steps. If we get the fundamentals right, I guess securing your Office 365 is going to be a cakewalk. You can have alerts, and these alerts work in tandem with your auditing profiles that are available. So for every audit profile, you can set thresholds, receive alerts based on the criticality level. You can set custom alerts again for different categories and get notified across different platforms: mobile, SMS, email, push, you name it. We will help you do that. Real-time notifications is something that you would definitely want to grab hold of, and that would pretty much be about today's session on Office 365 security. We saw how access control can be managed through secure delegation. We saw how you can track data leak or data transfer through the alerts and auditing and monitoring options that are available. We saw how to securely administer with the least privileged approach, and absolutely yes, email security from the reports that are available. We solve them through these 5 tips: auditing administrator access, monitoring administrator activities, creating custom profiles for organization specific scenarios, being able to set up multi-factor authentication as a security best practice, scoring as much as possible on your secure score, Microsoft best practice that's out there, and monitoring file access and sharing for applications like OneDrive, and going further. Thank you so much for having taken the time. If you have questions, please feel free to shoot your questions right now. I'm going to be available for some more time. It was wonderful bringing you the Office 365 Security and Compliance Center. Your presenter for the day, Jay. You all have been such a wonderful audience. Please use the chat to let me know how you felt about the session, and if you have any questions, kindly write to me on my email address as well. I'm always going to be available to give you and work with you on different cases. As a matter of fact, if you want a copy of today's webinar, please write to me or please leave your email address on the chat so that I can keep a note of it and send you across the video recording of this specific webinar on Office 365 security and compliance. Thank you so much, guys. You all have a great day. Bye bye.